So is there a formula, a pattern for plagues and pandemics? Is there a pattern? Is there any way to know when situations like this are going to come into our existence, into our world? Is there? That was my question. That's what was heavy on my mind for, I guess, the end of 2019 to the present. That's the question that I wanted to know the answer to. It could be an absolutely impossible quest, but that was truly at the core of the impetus to this video, to this research. Is there a pattern, any type of formula that one can see astrologically to plagues and pandemics? So here it goes. I say yes. I say yes. And it is my goal today to prove that to you and to build upon that more, to learn more and more and more. We're all like pieces of a puzzle right now, just learning and growing, because we're learning that there's so much more that we don't know, that we're learning and remembering. Okay, so there are 3 players, 3 characters, 3 planets involved astrologically in this pattern, in this formula. The 3 planets: Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. Specifically, Jupiter conjunct Pluto. And then Saturn. What do we mean by conjunct? Conjunct is when 2 planets are within 0 to 8 degrees from one another. There's 360 degrees in a circle. We're talking 0 to 8 degrees away from one another. But bigger than that, we're going to, although we're doing tropical Western astrology here, Western world, because the Gregorian calendar we're built on, the institutions that we're built on, the structures, our cube, all of it is Western astrology, tropical. It works. However, just as importantly is Vedic, sidereal, Eastern astrology, Mayan, etc., etc. There are a lot of other modalities that are wonderful. And like Vedic and sidereal, I'm bringing that up for a reason. I use the orb of the whole sign. Basically, what I mean by that is a conjunction for our purposes, because we're dealing with planets whose transits transits around take 248 years. Pluto takes 248 years to return back to a sign. So if it takes that long, if we're talking 250 years, then we're using the whole sign, because what that means is if Pluto is at 26 degrees Capricorn, and it's not going to be there again for another 250 years, if Jupiter comes into Capricorn too, and it's just at 0 degrees Capricorn, it's still a conjunction. They are both in Capricorn, and the ruler of Capricorn is Saturn. So they're depositing all of their energy, both of them simultaneously are depositing Jupiterian and Plutonian energy simultaneously into that Capricorn, into that Saturn, because Saturn rules what both of those planets are in. So the conjunction is as long as they're in the same sign, because we're dealing with transits, orbits of 250 years. Okay, why do we use these 3 players in particular? The Jupiter, the Pluto, and the Saturn. Well, Jupiter conjunct Pluto because Jupiter expands. It makes things big, makes everything abundant, total expansion, makes everything prevalent, widespread all throughout, makes it bigger. That's what Jupiter does. What does Pluto? What's Pluto? Pluto is death, it's pestilence, viruses. Although Neptune absolutely can be disease, yes, yes, yes. But specifically, Pluto is pestilence and viruses, and it's masses, because Pluto is about masses, and it's about the invisible underworld that you can't explain, and it affects masses. Pluto is also mass hypnosis, mass manipulation, masses of manipulation. So it's viruses, but it's also mass manipulation. Pluto can be all the invisible underbelly, underworld of it all. The underworld power. Pluto is underworld, invisible, underworld superpower. Pluto is also healing, mass healing, transformation, regeneration, huge on a mass level. So interesting that Pluto is also death and pestilence, but it's also mass healing, mass transformation. It's mass manipulation, but mass transformation and healing. It can go either way. That's what Pluto. And Jupiter expands whatever it touches. So Jupiter conjunct Pluto every single time, it creates a plague and pandemic. But not every single time. Every single time, looking at all these plagues that we're going to give an example of, Jupiter and Pluto are involved. But just because Jupiter and Pluto are conjunct doesn't mean that there's going to be a plague. There's a formula to it. And there's no way that it could be, because Jupiter is conjunct Pluto, because Jupiter's transit around takes 12 years. So Jupiter conjuncts Pluto every about 12, 14, 15 years, give or take. But no. There's a catch to what causes the plague and pandemic. So, what's Saturn, though? Let's describe what Saturn does to this formula. What's its part in this pattern? How is it a player in all of this? Well, Saturn makes everything manifest. It's the manifester. It crystallizes it. It materializes it. It is the cube of our existence for a reason, meaning it's kind of what we're built on. It's the foundation. It's the structure. It's the container to it all. It is the foundation of it all. It adds the structure. It also adds the control, the restriction, the authority. Saturn is all those things. The structure, the control to all of this, the structure of it adds. It could also add the authorities to all of this. It's possible. Okay, we got the three characters in this whole pandemic formula. We know it's Jupiter conjunct Pluto and it's Saturn. Now, what about Jupiter conjunct Pluto and Saturn? Well, either that conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto or Saturn, rule number one, they have to be in a cardinal sign. They have to be in a cardinal sign. Cardinal is that initiator, that initiating push. What are the cardinal signs? On that wheel of astrology, it's on the angles, the major angles, the changing of the seasons. First, you have Aries. That's that spring vernal equinox. So if it's in Aries, the formula, if it's in Cancer, that's the next angle. That's the summer solstice, that burst of initiating energy. Then the next one is Libra. Libra is fall. That's that autumnal equinox, that burst of energy? Or is it Capricorn? Is it Capricorn? And Capricorn is the winter solstice. The winter solstice, that burst of energy. It has to be either that conjunction or Saturn. Jupiter conjunct Pluto or Saturn have to be in one of those cardinal signs. Because that's that initiating push, that energy to get it going. That's rule number one to this pandemic formula, to this pandemic pattern. That's rule number one. Rule number two, Saturn has to be strong. Saturn has to be strong. That's the only other rule. But I'm going to break down what makes Saturn strong. But that's the only other rule. Number one rule to the pandemic formula, the pandemic pattern, is either the Jupiter conjunct Pluto conjunction or Saturn has to be in a cardinal sign. That's rule number one. Rule number two, Saturn has to be strong. What makes Saturn strong? What would make Saturn strong? Quite a few things. First thing that could make Saturn strong is if the conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto are in Capricorn. Because Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn. That Capricorn conjunction is deposited in Saturn. So that would make that formula at that point in time very strong. If the conjunction is in Capricorn, that's one of the ways that Saturn will be strong. The other way that Saturn will be strong is if Saturn is in the sign that it rules. That is Capricorn, yes, and also Aquarius, because Aquarius traditionally. So if Saturn is in Capricorn or Aquarius, because that's its home. So we got two ways that Saturn is strong. What's another way Saturn is strong? Another way? If Saturn is in Libra, yes, because Saturn is exalted in Libra. Absolutely, Saturn is exalted in Libra. And then there's one it's a hard one. I wouldn't have known this one. It's kind of a curveball. But in these examples, and a lot of times, if Saturn is in Leo, because Leo is the power supply, it's supplying power. It's supplying sun energy. Leo is sun. Sunlight, pure energy. That's the other way if Saturn is in Leo. Just to review, the four ways that Saturn is strong, is if that Jupiter conjunct Pluto, that conjunction is in Capricorn, because that Capricorn is deposited into Saturn, because Saturn's the ruler. That's the first way it's strong. The second way Saturn is strong is if it is in Capricorn or Aquarius, because that's what it rules. Capricorn and Aquarius. If Saturn is in one of those. The third way is if Saturn is in Libra, because Saturn is exalted in Libra. That's just where it's strong. That's just naturally where it's strong. And then last, which is the curveball, but if Saturn is in Leo, if it's in the sun, the power supply of the sunlight, that's like giving power to all of this. So we have it. It's very clear. We'll go through the examples, but it's number one, if the conjunction or Saturn is in a cardinal sign, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. Number two, if Saturn is strong, and Saturn is strong if that conjunction is in Capricorn. Saturn strong if it's in its home of Capricorn or Aquarius. Saturn strong if it's in Libra, where it's exalted. And surprisingly, Saturn is strong in Leo for plagues and pandemics, for patterns of that nature. Now let's go through it. The first example we have is, and we're going off of starting with 0 AD, where in this Western world, Western tropical astrology, they said 0 AD is the birth of the Lord. And we're starting there. So that means right now, 2021, Christ would be 2021 years old. But that's the calendar that everything is built on. So that's what we're working off right here. So in 549 AD, 549 years after, we had the Julian Plague. And with that plague, the formula was 100%. We have Jupiter conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. Jupiter conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. That's all you need for that one, because we already have the conjunction in a cardinal sign, and the conjunction is in Capricorn. So that means it fueled Saturn already. It made Saturn strong, which is the other part of the formula for Saturn to be strong. Has to be in a cardinal sign, the conjunction, or Saturn, and Saturn has to be strong. And it's already automatically strong because the conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto were in Capricorn. But where is Saturn, though? Just so we know. Saturn's also in Capricorn. Perfect pieces for a pandemic plague. You got all of it, double time. Jupiter and Pluto in Capricorn, and the initiating cardinal signs, and Saturn also in Capricorn, the initiating cardinal sign, but where it's strong because that's its home. This is the Julian Plague. The leader at that time, his name was Justinian. He was the ruler at the time in Europe, Justinian, and he blocked off different places of Europe and isolated different people in different countries and regions and said, you can't come in, you're infested, and really was able to control the situation that way. What's interesting about this is because Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn were all in Capricorn, that's exact same coordinates, planets, aspects, transits that we had in 2020. All of it in Capricorn, but we're going to get to that. Yeah. That's the first one starting in this Gregorian calendar. And yeah. The next one was in the year 1346 AD. This was the Black Death. 50 million Europeans died. 50 million. At least 60% of Europe's population died, perished. 60% gone of Europe of this Black Death right here. It lasted for about 7-8 years from 1346 to 1353. And what do we have? Jupiter conjunct Pluto in Aries. Jupiter conjunct Pluto in Aries. In Aries. That initial cardinal burst of energy, the first one, it's in Aries. So that makes it strong. But where's Saturn? Saturn is in Aquarius. It likes being in Aquarius too. That's its other home, Aquarius, traditionally. Aquarius. So that was a big one. Black Death. Yeah. The next one, 1771 AD. 1771, the last huge outbreak of the bubonic plague. Bubonic, the major one. This was the Russian plague. Now, I know that we said that we're just going to really focus on the Western world, which is Europe and the Americas. But if there is an Asian country, Russia is Asian, if there is an Asian country that is European-like, I would say Russia, a lot of Russia. There's a westernizedness to Russia, in my opinion. And so I wanted to include it because it's a pivotal, huge plague that occurred. And I believe that they're very much connected into our world, as we can see in our last elections and news cycles, even today. And so in 1771, we have the Russian plague, and that was Jupiter conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. Jupiter conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. So already, again, if we're looking at the formula, because Jupiter, the conjunction is in Capricorn, and Capricorn is where Saturn is deposited, it already makes Saturn strong in this formula. Saturn is already strong. But just because, let's look at where Saturn is. And Saturn is in Leo. I just think it needs to be noted, Saturn is in Leo for this one. And we said that that is another place that Saturn is strong, is in Leo. We didn't have to, because it was already strong, because the conjunction was in Capricorn, which is what Saturn rules. Capricorn deposits in Saturn. You get it. Huge one, 1771, Russian plague. This one where it's in Capricorn. Capricorn is authorities, the power structures at that time. There were a lot of riots, huge amount of plague riots broke out. The residents revolted against the state and the authorities. They really were convinced that it was a government conspiracy. This is in 1771. They were convinced it was the government. They just knew. Researched the 1771 plague riots when Capricorn was involved, just like they were involved in 2020 as well as 549 AD. It's always Jupiter conjunct Pluto in Capricorn, where the authorities are very much involved. And there's questions for some reason. Look at that one in 1771. It's interesting that that pattern repeated itself. There are people that say, and this takes a lot deeper research, that plagues and pandemics aren't anything new. They've been used. I don't want to say used, because that implies that I think that there was something nefarious planned with them. I feel if astrologer like myself can see where the pattern is occurring, I just believe the higher up power structures who definitely have astrologers, they know as well, whether it is planned or they know it's a good time where things will spread easily, or powers that be know that something is going to occur real soon. Sirens going off. Anyway, 1771 was a big one where the residents at the time really thought the authorities were involved and that it was a conspiracy. The next one is 1894 AD. Polio. Now, this is the first huge epidemic of polio in America. It happened quite a few times again it happened in like 1916, 1952. There were all these outbreaks, but this was the very first one, and this was in Vermont in 1894. Jupiter was conjunct Pluto in Gemini. This never happens. As you know, they were always cardinal signs and all the other ones. But this one, Jupiter is conjunct Pluto in Gemini. But Saturn is in Libra. You knew we had to have a cardinal. We got a cardinal. It has to be one or the other, either the conjunction or the Saturn. And this time it's the Saturn that is in Libra. But we have Jupiter conjunct Pluto in Gemini. Gemini is neighborhoods. I could see where it spreads easily through neighborhoods, whether it's by word of mouth and people just know. Is it in the air? Was it because of the what people were taking? There's all these questions. It's all controversy right now with the polio. I'm looking forward to some deeper research of what caused the huge prevalence of it. But it fits the formula right off the bat because we have a conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto, and the Saturn is in Libra, which is, well, it's exalted in Libra, first of all. It loves being in Libra, so Saturn is strong, and it also gives the cardinal that you need to make this initial push to make the plague pandemic occur. You need that initiating energy. To be noted, again, there were huge breakouts of polio in New York City in 1916 and 1952. And when they were in those years, the Pluto and so much was in cardinal signs. Later on, when the outbreaks occurred, they were in so much Aries, so much Cancer, cardinal all day in the future outbreaks, if you look up those dates of 1916 and 1952 as well. But the first initial outbreak in 1894 in Vermont, we have a Jupiter conjunct Pluto conjunction in Gemini, but Saturn is in Libra, where it's exalted and strong and in a cardinal sign. Fits the formula perfectly. Next we go to 1980. Oh, huge. 1918 Spanish flu. Major Spanish flu, 1918 H1N1. Jupiter was conjunct Pluto in Cancer. Cardinals. Cardinal. You got it right off the bat. Cardinal. And Saturn is in Leo. The conjunction is in Cancer. Cardinal. So we got the cardinal part done. And Saturn is in Leo. Yeah, that was a huge one, the Spanish flu. Oh, the next one that we're going to look at was 1981, HIV. That's when the first outbreak happened, 1981. Jupiter was conjunct Pluto, where? In Libra. In Libra. And where is Saturn? Saturn's also in Libra. Cardinal all throughout, all exalted. That Saturn is in Libra is exalted, so that gives Saturn that extra boost, makes Saturn very happy. Fits the formula perfectly. HIV outbreak couldn't be more perfect. And also to note that it's in Libra, and Libra, what I find interesting about Libra is it would be the perfect time to release a disease because Libra is so social. It's so social. It would allow for a spread socially to occur really easy if that is the case. Also, what's interesting about Libra is, although it's air and it's intellectual, so there's something so masculine about Libra because it is an air sign. It is that intellect. It's ruled by Venus, so it's very feminine with its manliness. It's almost gay. It's almost gay, Libra is. And I say that in the most blessed, beautiful way of having both sides and the best of both worlds. But I say that because it's so interesting that it spread throughout the gay community. Because if there would be a sign that is a little bit gay to me, it's Libra. I hope that's not offensive. I'm not trying to be first of all, gay shouldn't be offensive. And that doesn't mean if you're a Libra man that you're gay. That's not what I'm saying, because that's not the case. Trust, that's not the case. I'm just saying for a masculine type of sign, because of it is so airy and intellectual, for it to also be ruled by Venus, which is so feminine and Venetian and all the sensual pleasures and beauty of life. And you can love all that stuff and still be masculine. And not one is right or the other, but it's just an interesting fact that it's spread throughout the gay community. And it is a very social sign. So I can see where it could easily spread. And if implanted, could spread easily. Next is 2009, swine flu. Jupiter was conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. So we got the cardinal right off the bat. And then, we're good, because Capricorn is making the Saturn already strong, because they're both depositing in Saturn. So Saturn is already strong in this situation. But where is Saturn? Just interesting to note, Saturn is in Virgo. We haven't mentioned anything about any Virgo. It's not really that important, because we already know that Saturn is strong, because the conjunction is in Capricorn. So we already fulfilled our rules of this. But just to note, you look at that Virgo and you say, okay, Saturn is in Virgo, but what's the ruler of Virgo? Mercury? What else? Chiron. Chiron's controversial, but I feel Chiron too. It's Mercury and Chiron. Those are the rulers of Virgo. Where's Mercury in 2009? Mercury is in Capricorn. So it's deposited in Capricorn again. It's actually conjunct Pluto in Capricorn, along with that Jupiter in Capricorn. So Mercury is in Capricorn. And where's Chiron? Just because, let's just see. We're already good, but where's Chiron? Chiron's in Aquarius at this time in 2009. Chiron's in Aquarius, strong. The other ruler, or the other place where Saturn rules. So Virgo. So let's just repeat. In 2009, Jupiter was conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. So it's we already have the initiating cardinal sign. We already have that taken care of. But also, it also makes Saturn already happy, because it's in Capricorn, and Saturn rules Capricorn. All that Capricorn is deposited in that Saturn. But just because we just want to see, Saturn is in Virgo. And where is that Virgo depositing? Well, Mercury rules it, and it's in Capricorn. And Chiron is the other ruler of it, and it's in Aquarius. So we got Capricorn and Aquarius, what Saturn loves. Also to be noted, we had about 12,000 deaths in the U.S. that year from the swine flu, and about 151,000 to 575,000 globally. It wasn't one of the big plagues, wasn't one of the huge ones, but there is question of whether that one was supposed to be way, way bigger, and the structures and the powers that be were a little bit disappointed. My advice to them would be, don't pick when Saturn is in Virgo. Yeah, it wasn't that strong then. You know, it still was good because Jupiter was conjunct Pluto in Capricorn, so you were still good. I could see where you tried. I could see, because you were like, okay, this should still work, but I just don't think it was that strong in Virgo. And I'm not knocking Saturn in Virgo. My Saturn is in Virgo. I'm not knocking Saturn in Virgo at all. I can see it where it was a good try. giving you good credit. But where y'all banged it out of the park, where y'all did a really good job, was 2020. Now, 2020, you got Jupiter conjunct Pluto in Capricorn, and you also have Saturn in Capricorn. It's strong all throughout. It's just strong all throughout. It's the perfect formula for making a plague pandemic some type of control authority, because it's all in Capricorn. It's the perfect time to do that. And just to finish with the formula, though, we have the conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto in Capricorn, and because it is in a cardinal sign, the formula is complete. And it's in Capricorn, which Saturn rules. So it already makes Saturn strong. But to make it extra strong, Saturn is actually in Capricorn too. Whenever we have this type of formula, there's usually issues where people are complaining about government and conspiracies and authorities and conspiracies and the structures and powers that be, because it's in Capricorn. And those are the authorities and the structures and the powers that be. Is that what the case is? I don't know. Don't shoot the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger again. I'm just delivering, we're just stating the facts here. We figured out the formula. We figured out a pattern. I would say the next time you're about to see Jupiter conjunct Pluto in a cardinal sign, the next time this is going to happen is when everything is in Aries. Now, that's not for another, 40 years or so? It's a while. We got some time. We got to do the math. We got some time on that. But the last time it was in Aries, just so you know, that's when we had that huge Black Death, where there were, 60% of the population passed. That was in 1346. That was the last time Jupiter was conjunct Pluto in Aries. So we got that coming up, nothing to worry about. We're still dealing with this one right here, the 2021 of Jupiter conjunct Pluto in Capricorn, Saturn in Capricorn. That one, we're still dealing with whatever is really in control of it, whether it's nature or not. We are still dealing with this one, huh? We're still dealing with this one. Fits the formula. So the next one would be in Aries. We're not going to get this Capricorn one for another 250 years. I would say to those people 250 years from now, when Jupiter conjunct Pluto is in Capricorn and Saturn is strong, I would say be careful. There's definitely going to be a plague pandemic. No question. No question. When Jupiter is conjunct Pluto in Aries, and when Saturn gets to one of its strong stations, I'd say look out for that too. But that's some years off. Let's handle this 2021 that is still going into 2022. And as we can see in a lot of these pandemics, they could be 7-8 year long endeavors. Not all of them. Some of them are quick. Some of them don't work. Some of them don't stick. Let's make this one not stick. Let's make this one not stick. Let's figure out what we need to do. Yeah. Our power is the will of the mind. The will of the mind. The will of the body. The will of the mind and the will of the body. We so powerful there. Can't nobody beat us. Perhaps what these pandemics and plagues are for is to try to harness all of that energy and power of the mind and of the body that the people have. It ain't happening though. Too powerful. We just too powerful. Can't be suppressed. So this last Jupiter-Pluto conjunction that ushered in an energy of whether it was a plague, pandemic, or mass manipulation or mass hypnosis, whatever the Jupiter conjunct Pluto energy was, may it be transformed into mass, abundant healing. Mass healing. May that be what the truth of that Jupiter-Pluto conjunction was and is. Mass transformation. Mass healing. And so it is.